Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Genesys Cloud Communities Q&A show, the show where we answer your pressing questions in the Genesys Cloud online community. My name is Matt Lawson. I'm your online community manager, and we have a big episode today. Why not? It's May. So much going on. WEMA, the WEM's community's May event is happening. Check it out. We have the hybrid media orgs going live next week, well, the week this airs, and this episode is going to give you a tour of that brand new functionality. Plus, can you believe it? We have one of Genesys' very own above average Joes on the show to answer your questions from the community. These pro service vets are incredible at answering questions and helping members. This episode will be no different. Can't wait to show you that. Hey, Alan, welcome back to the show. Greg, I feel like at one point you were on the show, but I've honestly reached the point where I forget who I've met doing this show. It's been 3 years. I was on a meeting with somebody the other day, and embarrassingly, I was like, you should do the Q&A show. It's great. And they said they've done it before. I was embarrassed. But Greg, I've worked with you on so many things outside of this. Alan, we'll get to you. But Greg, can you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, indeed, this is my first time on the show. I've worked with you in a lot of different aspects, but I am a senior technical writer at Genesys Cloud, and I am documenting the hybrid media feature. Been working closely with Alan and his team to make sure that I cover everything, and it will all be available in the Resource Center.
Excellent. Looking forward to showing what you all have in store in terms of this new feature. Alan, my man, back on the show, third episode, going for some kind of a record. How have you been?
I have been well, busy but well.
Really excited to have you back. Real quick, can you talk about your role at Genesys?
Sure. I'm a principal product manager here at Genesys Cloud, specializing in our real-time voice and media services, both in the cloud and in the form of our premises edge appliances, and any of the technologies needed to facilitate those services and connections.
Cool. And Alan is pretty active in the community. In fact, I think you have a beta open right now. So if anybody wants an excuse to spend more time with them, with Alan, they can sign up. What's the new beta you have going?
Global Media Fabric Phase 2. We're accepting applicants now, and we'll be looking to activate that on approved orgs later this month.
Cool, excellent. And so head over to the beta headquarters. If you're interested in that feature, you should be able to register there. And if you have any questions, you can ask Alan. But guys, today we're actually here to talk about something really exciting. A beta that you all launched almost a year ago is concluding. We're about to go to GA. We're talking about a big one, hybrid media orgs. I remember, Alan, when you first mentioned advertising this in the community, you mentioned it would be a popular feature, and you were not wrong. We had a large number of people who wanted to be a part of this beta and got to test it. And once they heard about this episode, a lot of people had questions. So a ton of content to go over today. I'm looking forward to it. Let's start at the beginning. What is hybrid media orgs?
Way back when Pure Cloud, as it was called then, was launched, for voice and media processing, you had to use a premises edge hardware appliance. This was an appliance you ordered from us. We built it. We shipped it to you. All of your voice and telephony connections were facilitated using those appliances. Later, we added cloud media products like Genesys Cloud Voice and BYOC Cloud. Those are available. They're available all around the world, and they work great. The problem is we don't give you a path between them. If you're running premises edges and you want to move to cloud media, we don't have an easy way to facilitate that. We also don't let you run them both seamlessly within the same org at the same time. So hybrid media provides the capability to do both of those. We bring those features together in an org, let you move resources and calls between them, and let you migrate. So quite a powerful feature.
And the beta went well?
Yes, the beta went well. It's the largest beta I've been involved with in my 15 plus years here at Genesys. Interest was very high. We were able to onboard almost half of the applicants.
Cool.
But now we're approved to go GA, so we'll be going GA soon. If that hasn't been announced yet, wherever you may be viewing this, go check out the Genesys Cloud Resource Center and release notes, and see the latest.
Yes, and we wouldn't do this episode if we weren't really thinking it'll be soon. So very soon. Alan, excellent. Can we go ahead and see this bad boy in action?
Yeah, let me share my screen. First of all, I want to show you the App Foundry. This is like the Genesys Ecospheres App Store. For your org, you may be running Premises Edges today. You may be running Genesys Cloud Voice. You may be running BYOC Cloud. To get to that hybrid state, it's as simple as accessing the App Foundry, searching for the telephony connection options you wish to add, click on them. And I'm not logged in here, so oh, yeah, there is a purchase button, but I'm not logged in, so it wouldn't actually work for my org. But for a prod org, you simply log into the App Foundry, search for the option you're looking for, and add it to your org. You need to realize that if this is going to put you in a hybrid state, meaning your premises today and you're adding a cloud offer, or your cloud today and you're adding premises, this will trigger a migration, which may impact live calls. So it's important that you add these items to your org during off hours or during a time where you are okay with potential call impact.
Like a lot of apps in the App Foundry, will there be a free trial period, or is the only option pretty much to purchase?
I'm glad you asked, because the price is free. We don't
excellent.
charge specifically for hybrid behavior. Standard charges apply for the individual pieces. So if you add BYOC Cloud to your org, you have a certain amount of fair use minutes per user that you have in your org. But should you exceed that, you will be paying the per minute fees for BYOC usage. Same thing for GCV. You add GCV here, add it to your org. It's not going to cost you anything. But if you do go purchase or port numbers in and then start incurring the GCV voice minute usage, you would be subject to those fees. Same as with BYOC premises. Of course, you would have the purchase price of any edge devices, and then any possible monthly reoccurring charges, depending on the type of edge you choose.
Cool.
But to simply add these to your org, no, there's no cost.
Cool. And to see those three options, I know you had to try a couple of different searches, but if anybody wants to steal from Alan, it looks like it was BYOC Genesys Cloud Voice. I know some people watch this on their phone or even just listen to it, but BYOC Genesys Cloud Voice in the App Foundry will take you to what you need. Cool. What's next, Alan?
Okay, so assuming I've clicked on those and activated them on my org, which I have for my test org here, there are some new concepts to understand. Previously, when you add premises edges to an org, we automatically, behind the scenes, create a full mesh of tie trunks between those edges. So users homed to one edge can reach users home to another edge. ACD can find users across any edge. A call comes inbound on a trunk and hits one edge, but it's destined for a resource homed to another edge. That mesh of tie trunks facilitates that. Unfortunately, they were all behind the scenes and hidden, and there's no control of them for customers. With hybrid, we have split those tie trunks into three types. We now have direct, which is what we've always had. It's just a direct tie trunk between those premises edge interfaces. We have indirect, which is useful when there's a NAT between one edge and another edge, or one site and another site. And finally, the most exciting one, Cloud Proxy. Cloud Proxy uses our WebRTC technology to broker the connection through the cloud. So these devices can be on private networks. They can both be between a net, behind a NAT. Whatever the network situation is, we will broker a connection through the cloud without having to worry about firewalls. Cool. You can see configuration for these three. If you go look at a premises edge and then go to network, you'll see these site interconnect options. And what this means is, anytime the solution calls for the use of a direct tie trunk, this is the interface we're going to use for that tie trunk on this edge. Anytime the solution calls for an indirect tie trunk, this is the interface we're going to use on this edge. Same for Cloud Proxy. Anytime the solution calls for a Cloud Proxy tie trunk, we're going to use this interface. These can all be the same interface, or if your network situation requires them to be different, perhaps you have a local network where you reach your local edges using a separate interface from the interface you use to reach the cloud. That's up to you and your network situation. For indirect, there's an additional step needing to be configured, because you're using indirect to help with a NAT situation where the edge device has a private IP, there's a NAT and an outside IP. You need to set up a one-to-one mapping from that outside IP to the inside IP, and then edit the specified interface, and supply that outside IP. If you don't know what NAT is or NENT is, or want to bother with configuring any of that, forget it and just configure it for direct or cloud proxy. One of the options will work for you. Once you've configured the interfaces on your edges, they're ready to be taken advantage of in site links. So if we jump over to sites, I can go look at, this is a site that some of my premises edges live in, and I can see a new tab called Site Links. This is how I enable or disable communication between this site and other sites that are capable of media processing. This site that I'm editing, hybrid media premises site, I can inspect my connection to my cloud resources and see that it's enabled. If I wanted it to be disabled, I flip that switch and calls will not route over that site link. Once I enable it and save, I can now communicate between this site and our cloud media services. Note that I cannot edit the connection method because sites or connections to the cloud must be cloud proxy. You cannot use direct or indirect. If I look at my connection to another premises site, I do have all three options possible. So greater amount of options for admins to connect their sites around the world with premises edges, and now you can link them to cloud media. Once you have those enabled, you have your interfaces configured, you have the interfaces for the new types of tie trunks specified, and you've enabled the site links. From there, we take over and we make call routing a cinch. If I were to pick up my phone and call a user on the other side of that site link, their phone would alert, an audio path would be established, and we'd be off talking, just like if I were to call a user on a different premises edge today. It's very quite straightforward once you've configured it. The call simulator has also been updated to take advantage of these concepts, and it will tell you if the site link is up for that call path and if something can be reached or not. That's of great value when you're experimenting with your configuration and want to make sure that various users can reach each other, or you can reach various external resources. Speaking of external resources, if you go look at your outbound routes on a site, and remember, I'm looking at a premises site right now, but I'm able to put cloud media, BYOC trunks, GCV trunks on my outbound route here. And if I were looking at a cloud media site, I would be able to put premises trunks in my outbound routes. Assuming the site links between those two are enabled, you can leverage these trunks between sites. So I can have all of my telephony coming in and out through a cloud BYOC cloud trunk or GCV trunk, yet reaching users on premises edges. And the opposite, I can have premises trunks. All my inbound calls are coming into my premises edges, yet they fan out to users home to cloud media. Or I can mix it up. I can have calls to and from cloud, to and from premises. I can configure an external SBC or carrier to fail over between the two. Should cloud media not be in operation, the calls would then come in through my premises edges. It's all in the hands of the administrator to configure however they desire. Moving from premises to cloud, for example, is as simple as in a premises org, you create a new site, you designate it as a cloud media site, you attach any trunks you desire, you set up the dial plan as you desire, and then simply change your users' stations to use that site. It's as simple as that. Those users are now homed to cloud media and probably using cloud trunks for their external communication. That's a pretty quick run through. I know you had some questions come in, so let's flip over to those if you're ready.
Just so everyone knows, when we do an episode of the Q&A show, I typically have a pinned post up, letting people know ahead of time what the topic will be, who the expert will be, all of that. And we like giving people the option to email us, qashow@genesys.com, or you can post in the community. And today we actually had people choose both options. I'm going to start with the email just to get it out of the way. If somebody emails, I do like to keep their confidentiality private. But this person writes, hi, a question I have for the hybrid org Q&A scenario, global org hosted out of EMEA, US requirement for GC agents will have global media capability for edge devices in the US, privacy shield and GDPR issues with having US recordings located outside of US. I believe once interaction is complete, the US edge will upload recording to host org, which will be outside of US. I then believe you could possibly use recording as service to take recording out of home edge and put it into the US again. However, I think you lose functionality when you do this, such as analytics, which is a requirement. Is there a solution to overcome all of the regulatory constraint? What do you think, Alan? Any feedback on this?
Yeah, this is a common topic. Let me first say that it is true that yes, today, no matter where these recordings are generated, they do end up in the org's home region. That's where they are stored for consumption via our API and within the WEM UIs in the app itself. You can certainly pull those out of there. You can download them. You can store them wherever you want. But that would be a non-native Genesys storage solution. And the UI would no longer let you pull them down, interact with them, and have the analytics behind them. We have an effort that's just in the chartering phase. In fact, I came from a charter of it yesterday to allow for regional storage of recordings where we provide you with storage options in various regions around the world. And then via policy, you are able to dictate which recordings end up being stored. This is chartering and design now, so it's not expected to be released anytime soon, but we definitely acknowledge that as a need that our customers have expressed, and we are working towards resolving that.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the discussion that I put up in the community, because like I said, we had a couple of people write in there. So just so you all know, here's my pinned post for the show, and here is the first series of questions that came in. It's from our friend Vaughn. I think at this point, Vaughn has been featured on the show maybe as much as me, but I love it. Keep the questions coming. We appreciate it. And he always has some good ones. So I'm just going to go in order. What's the best practice or recommendation when it comes to where carrier trunks should be terminated in the hybrid model?
Okay. Recommendation is you do what suits your business. Wherever the bulk of your users are, whether that's premises or cloud, perhaps it would make sense to have your PSTN trunks anchored, so you're not having to send all calls through the cloud proxy links. With that said, you certainly can send all of your calls through the cloud proxy links. There's nothing wrong with it. It could potentially use up more of your internet bandwidth, let's say, but that may or may not be a problem depending on your business. So we have customers who have entrenched premises carrier contracts, and they need to live out those contracts, or perhaps their premises carrier local to them has fantastic rates that they can't beat elsewhere. They'll continue to use those premises trunks and bring all their calls in through their premises edges. As those contracts expire, they'll consider redirecting that traffic up to cloud media, or if they have their own SBC, they could have the calls hit their SBC, bounce straight up to cloud media, bypassing those premises edges. It's all up to you and what your business needs. You just need to consider when these calls come in, what is their destination? If the calls are coming in and they're destined for users on the premises edges, perhaps it makes sense to bring them in on the premises. If the calls are coming in and they're destined for cloud media users, it may make sense to bring them into the cloud first. But if you're going to be moving off of premises as those edges age out and make your way up to all cloud anyway, start moving up to the cloud now. It's really up to you, whatever you need.
Well, I think on the issue of trunks and what you were just talking about with cloud and premises, I think this next question is a good follow-up. What issues might there be with having trunks in both BYOCC and BYOCP, which I'm guessing the C's and the P's there mean cloud and premise?
That's right, cloud and premises. No issues. It just depends on your configuration. You'll have to be careful with your dial plans to make sure calls are going out the way you want them to. Perhaps if you have a local premises trunk and these are local calls, you want to make sure your dial plan sends them right out there through your local edge, as opposed to out through a cloud media cloud trunk and then back local. But it's all up to you. No problem with cloud and premises trunks existing. You can even put both on the outbound routes of any site. Just steer the usage of them by dial plan.
Going back to the heart of our relationship, Alan, a question about WebRTC. Are there any special considerations needed for WebRTC under the hybrid model?
Not exactly, but there is a good point to make. As I mentioned earlier, the cloud proxy trunks, which connect the premises edges to the cloud, and can also be used to connect premises edges between two sites in different data centers. That is born out of our WebRTC technology. So if you're going to be using cloud proxy tie trunks to connect premises and cloud, you need to be sure that the firewall protecting those edge devices from the internet is configured to meet the requirements for WebRTC on premises edge. If you don't do that, you'll see things like media failure, media negotiation failure. So keep an eye on that. Now, to directly answer the question, WebRTC will continue to function as it did before with premises edges. It also continues to function as it did before with cloud media. And if you have a WebRTC station for a user and you want to move it between premises and cloud, it's as easy as editing that station and changing their site to the other site, from premises site to the cloud site or vice versa.
Gotcha. Anything to be aware of around transcription behavior in a hybrid model?
Yes, the short answer is it will behave exactly how it always has. For calls flowing through cloud media, we open up a real-time media stream over to a transcription receptor in the cloud, and those are transcribed right then and there. For calls going through premises edge trunk, we wait till the end of the call. Once we have the compressed recording, as bandwidth allows, we push that up to the cloud and it is ingested in a queue and then transcribed after the fact. That will continue to happen. For calls that come in through a premises trunk or go out through a premises trunk, the premises behavior will apply. And for cloud calls, the cloud behavior will apply. And as a general note, any features that you see that say they require cloud media or they're only compatible with cloud media, BYOC cloud, GCV, they will function in a hybrid org as long as that call is coming in through a cloud media trunk and going through our cloud media microservices. If it's a call that's limited to the premises side of the org, those features will not be accessible for those calls.
Two more from Vaughn. The first is, what intra-edge communication is required?
When you're within a site, so say you have 5 edges within one site, we automatically use direct tie trunks because we assume you're in the same site, you're on the same network, local routing is available between the direct interfaces on those edges. That's how they've always worked. Once you have multiple sites, that's where we are providing you with options to choose from. You can go ahead and use direct, which assumes a local route between the local IP of the edges in these sites, this site, with the local IP of the edges in this site. If that's not the case, maybe it's 2 different third-party data centers you've engaged and there's no private network between them, you can try indirect, and that would require a one-to-one mapping of an outside IP to inside IP per edge. But that would still be SIP and standard SIP and media flowing back and forth, TLS, of course. If that's not feasible, then you can use cloud proxy. And cloud proxy facilitates those calls by bouncing the signaling up through the cloud and then negotiating media, much like a WebRTC call does. So those are the options. Whatever works best for you, you're free to choose and use.
Cool. And one more question from Vaughn, but I don't think it's our last good question. Anything to consider with regards to DR/BCP in the hybrid model?
Many customers are interested in using hybrid for failover purposes or DR purposes. That can be done to a degree. You can set up premises edges and have them ready and waiting, have trunks attached, everything you need, dial plans, all that. You can have cloud media doing the same. And should you encounter a fault in either of them, you can move your users over to leverage the other. With WebRTC, we limit you to 1 station per user. So you can't just have 2 stations sitting there on standby and let the user choose. An admin would need to go in and redirect the site for that station. If you have hardware phones, that's a different story. You could have a hardware phone that's attached to premises, and then you can have WebRTC attached to the cloud, and the user could switch between the two using the station selector. Seems like an awful big hassle to me. So I would probably just wait until there's an issue and then flip my users over via a public API script or something like that. What we do not provide is automatic failover. If you have a hardware phone, we don't let you dual register, primary to cloud, secondary to premises, or vice versa, and then fail over. That is not supported. So you would have to move the station between the two models.
Okay, gotcha. Greg, what do you think? Do we want to give Alan a quick break so you can show us what you've been working on in the Resource Center?
Well, actually, I have a couple of follow-ups to Alan, things that we've discussed before. First thing I would like to bring up is the edge versions. If you're now BYOC premises, you have to be running a certain version on your edge in order for this hybrid to work.
Yeah, that's true. But the version that's required has been out for so long. As long as you've updated in the past 2 or 3 months, even, you're okay in that regard.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the phones. During the beta, we had a discussion about if you have audio codes or Genesys phones on your BYOC premise organization, when you move to a hybrid organization, those phones will not work in the cloud. Is that still correct?
Yes, they would continue working as they always have, homed to a premises hardware edge, but a phone that is not supported in our cloud media offers will continue to not be supported in our cloud media offers. Hybrid doesn't change that. We have those models listed on the Resource Center. So if you're having a purchasing decision right now and you are going to move to cloud media, I definitely advise you make sure that the phones you purchase are compatible with cloud media.
Greg, anything else you wanted to ask Alan? If not, I do have one more question from a customer.
No, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Cool, perfect. This last question does come from Brenda, another contributor to the show that we really appreciate. She has a question. I was trying to lead in smoothly. I guess I can't. Brenda writes, I have a question. Since my management just asked about virtual edges, will it work with virtualized edges in an AWS cloud? And then as a follow-up, are virtual edges still a thing? I love that, Brenda. Am I still a thing? Or any of us still a thing? Let's hear what Alan has to say.
There's a lot of danger in this question because there's a lot of words that are overloaded and often used for different purposes. Let's back up and say we have premises edges. Edge is an all-in-one application that does media processing. It's a SIP registrar for phones. It does phone provisioning. It does all kinds of things. That's what Edge is. It's an all-in-one thing. We provide that in hardware device form. And to date, we've also had a premises virtual edge image that you could download and implement on a dedicated Hyper-V host. That is Edge, and that is the one and only true virtual edge. It's a premises offer that you host yourself on dedicated hardware. When we're talking about cloud media, people often say virtual edge in the cloud, AWS edge, different terminology like that, because it once was. When we first released our cloud media stack, we had edges running in the cloud. We no longer have those. And actually, I'll show you in my org. If you go look at my edge listing here in my hybrid org, you'll note right here, we have this instance and it's got a little lock symbol by it. It's a cloud media control instance. It's not doing a whole lot anymore. Instead of doing media processing, handling phone registrations and all that, all those are doing these days is call session management and dial plan. So when people say virtual edge in the cloud, I cringe a little bit because we've moved away from that. And to help clarify everything, it's good to talk through it. Now, if your question is, what about those instances in the cloud? Yes, we still do have those. They will go away at some point once call session and dial plan are also decomposed out into their own microservices. But yeah, you will see those. It's nothing you can control. They're instantiated automatically, and as call activity scales up in your org, we add more, and as call activity decreases, they phase out. So there's not much to do with those, and really not a whole lot to talk about with those. If what Brenda is asking about is taking that premises virtual edge image that we provide, that Hyper-V image, and somehow self-hosting that in AWS to make your own self-cloud hosted premises edge, that's definitely not supported, and I don't advise pursuing such a route. Yeah.
Gotcha. Just strong warning, like, hey, don't go into Jurassic Park. Don't do that.
That's right. That's right.
Two pieces of advice.
Don't go down that route. It's not going to go well. And if and when you have trouble, I certainly won't be able to help you.
Right. No Q&A show can cover that.
That's right.
I know leading into the show, you talked about some new technology. Did you get to touch on that through the questions or your demonstration?
Yeah, that was the cloud proxy tie trunks. They're quite impressive. When I activated this feature on my org, I went to configure it, and it was literally maybe 10 clicks, and I had my premises edges sitting right down here and my hardware phones tied to them, able to call up through cloud media out through a cloud carrier trunk. It was about 10 clicks. It was incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm very proud of what we've produced there. I guess the only other thing to call attention to is Greg has been working on Resource Center content, and it's going to be published as of GA, which is May 11th at this point. That will include some steps to help you get hybrid going. Like once you've migrated to hybrid, it's not active. You have to go in via administrative action to make it work. And one of those steps involves moving your edges into the hybrid edge group, configuring the interfaces, configuring the tie trunk interface selection, and then the site links. We'll have that all in the Resource Center. And of course, there's always the community forums. If you have questions, you can ask questions on there. There are other customers, like our 70 to 100 or whatever it ended up being, beta customers who've gone through it before. We have our internal IT resources, our professional services, anybody else who lurks out there in the forums.
So many lurkers, yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we can see those questions and hopefully address them in a timely manner.
Cool. Yeah, and Greg, when the Resource Center stuff goes live, I'd love to include it in these show notes as well. Maybe just ping me the link and I can add them or whatever.
Sure, that's not a problem. We will definitely have an about hybrid media page, which will contain all of the information on how to. We'll provide an overview of the hybrid media. There will be a section on if you're BYOC premises and you're going to the cloud. There will be a section that informs you if you're a cloud customer already, how do you go ahead and add BYOC premises to your organization and pull it all together into this newfangled hybrid media organization that we now have. So, and I will note that each article has Resource Center feedback on the bottom of it. So if there's anything that's not clear as you read through the article, be sure to click that button at the bottom of the page and let us know what additional information we can provide. We've been in this thing so long and so much detail, there are bound to be little things that slip through the cracks. Now, I don't want to say that happens often because it doesn't. We are all professionals here, but if it does, make sure you use the Resource Center feedback and let us know how we can help. We want to be empathetic. We want to make sure all of our customers understand everything that we are doing.
Alan, Greg, thanks so much again for coming on the show. Now it's time to salute because we have a veteran pro services specialist joining us to answer your questions from the community. I'm talking about the above average Joe's very own Patrick.
When the online community has questions and no one else can help, there's one group who can answer the call. They're pro services ready for hire. The above average Joes. Meet Patrick Johnson, Senior Principal Pro Services Consultant. A Genesys devotee since 2018. Today, he's answering your questions.
Man, look at that above average Joe signing on to the community. Good to have you in our service, sir. How are things going?
Going good, going good. Busy as normal, but we can always make time for the Genesys community.
Cool. Glad to hear it. I know you and I have already talked. It sounds like today you have 2 questions that you want to go over. I won't waste too much time because I know we're going to get a couple of demos out of you, and the questions are rather lengthy. So let's just hop right in. I'm actually going to share my screen. So the first question that we have is about outbound dialing. And it comes to us from Eric. The question is, we are trying to leverage best time to call values from an outbound contact list, but we are having issues that if the contact falls outside the callable window within the outbound flow, the number is still being dialed. Is there a way to modify the call contact phone value to something that is uncallable prior to dialing? We would like the dialer to suspend the call until the callable window for the defined values opens up. But with the limits in looping, the contact record eventually maxes out of the flow and is dialed, even if a disconnect action is added to an overflow or default path. Whew, I think I did a great job reading that. I think you're going to do an even better job answering it. Patrick, what do you think? Any advice for Eric?
Yeah, so that's kind of a different question, and I'm going to try to assume what you're meaning here and kind of go over that in a little bit more detail here. So when we're going into outbound dialers, there's an option here called contactable time sets, and based on your response, that's kind of where you're wanting to go there. However, it sounds like you may not be utilizing this feature. So I just kind of wanted to cover it a little bit more in detail. So when you're in the campaign management and you are creating a contact list, when you actually go to create the contact list for the first time, you have an option here to turn on automatic time zone mapping. Okay. With automatic time zone mapping, that will go ahead and utilize the customer's area code to figure out which time zone that they are currently in. However, there is an option in there where you could actually specify a time zone. So if you have that information for the customer, you can go ahead and specify the exact time zone. You'll want to go ahead and follow our formats for that. Now, for the attempt controls, you can do that under advanced. We also can specify zip code, and that will help narrow it down. The specific use case for that is, example, you live in Michigan, you have a Michigan cell phone number, and then you move to Arizona. You are not in the Eastern time zone anymore. However, going off your area code, you still would show up as an Eastern. So if you have those zip codes based on CRM, account records and everything like that, you would go off the zip code there to be able to say they're not in Eastern, they're in Arizona. Okay. Otherwise, if you specify those time zones, you can come under the contactable time sets here. You can click create new, create your time set for a particular campaign. We'll go ahead and click save add. And then this is where you can come in and you can see a calendar view, or you can do detailed. And then up here is where you'll actually specify the time zone. So as an example, if we're looking at America, New York, I can go ahead and say that I want to call, not on Sundays, not on Saturdays, and I want to call between 9 and 5 for this particular time set. Okay, so it'll check the contact to see if they are within this time zone, and if they are, then it'll only contact them during those hours. Okay, and so you can break those out for all of those. Otherwise, they're under the outbound settings tab is callable window for mapped contacts. So this is where the automatic time zone mapping that we were talking about, you can actually specify the hours that you want to be able to call within that mapped contact. Because if you remember, we showed that it would be automatically mapped to a time zone, but we didn't specify when to call them for that time zone. So that's where you would come in here and specify those. And then if the contact was unmapped, what would you want to do as far as a default calling, and then what time zone would that be at? So that would be my recommended approach there. What that'll end up doing is it will end up skipping the contact if it's not their position. Now, I know you referenced being able to loop through and kind of recycle. And so what you can do is under the voice campaigns, you can create kind of like a sequence, okay? And you can say reset. You can specify the campaign. You can put in a repeat sequence. Let's go ahead and click save. Yeah, so the next thing you want to do to kind of reset these campaigns that you have here is when you go under list, let me go to rule management. Sorry, rule management, you go to campaign rules, click create new. So this is when you can go ahead and specify the campaigns that you want to run these conditions on. And what you can do is you can actually judge it based off of the campaign progress. And you can say, you know, when campaign progress equals or is greater than, you know, let's just say 50%, okay? Then your actions there could actually be to recycle the campaign, okay? So the best option here is when you're running through, you're getting through those contacts successfully, you would have rules under the rule management to mark those contacts as uncallable. So that way, when you recycle, it doesn't go back through and call those.
And I saw in a couple of windows where it looks like if there are, for instance, 2-time windows in the same day, you can create those different flows. Like you can have, you know, 8 to noon on Monday, and then, you know, it picks up again 3 to 6 also on Mondays or whatever. Like that's really cool. Very nice.
Yeah, you can specify them out on the days, and then even if you are open on the weekends, you can include those. Generally, we don't see those, but you can throw that in there.
Cool, nice. This next question that we have may actually be more work for me than you, but let's give it a try. Big in. Let's see here. I'm going to just kind of read some highlights. We always link to the questions that were answered in the show notes and on the community. So for the full description, feel free to go there. I don't know if I'll read all of this, but returning calls bypass all menu IVR options and go straight to a queue. We have a scenario that might be a little specific to us, but figured I would write it here and see if anyone might have an idea on this. We have a team that completes outbound calls on behalf of a phone number that is shared with other teams. This phone number is our advertised phone number for people to call us. When that outbound team calls a customer, sometimes the customer doesn't answer and the call goes to the customer's voicemail or the call disconnects, etc. Then the customer calls us back. But when they do, they need to listen to the IVR menu options, then talk to someone on our inbound team. Then that person, the inbound team, transfers the call to our outbound team to answer. Is it possible that when the outbound team calls the customer and the call goes to voicemail, that Genesys Cloud could recognize this? And then when the customer calls back, the call goes straight back to the outbound team, bypassing the menu IVR and speaking to the inbound team, taking them straight to success. That's not how he worded it. That's how I'm going to word it. What do you think, Patrick? I know there's a few follow-up questions, but let's start there.
When you are going in, obviously there's multiple different ways. So I'm going to kind of dip into a little bit of everything here. So I'm judging, or I would assume that when you're creating your campaign there, the option here of specifying a specific phone number and a name is not an option. And so what happens is when those dialer calls are made from that particular campaign, that phone number and name would actually be published out. And then you would have that number, which would be unique to the dialer campaign. You would create a call route to send that directly to an inbound flow that's specified for the outbound dialer. Okay. So if that is not able to be utilized for some reason, then there's a couple ways that I'm thinking here. So when you go to actually create and do your contact list, most likely you're going to be using either a CSV file and uploading that manually, or you're going to be actually using the platform APIs to update that contact list. Okay, so one thing or two ways you could do this is utilizing data tables. You could create a data table, take that CSV file that you're uploading for the contact list, you could actually upload that into a data table. And then when the customer calls back in, you could take the call.Annie and use that as the key for the data table to look up and see if that contact is actually in the contact list that was uploaded to that data table. Okay, so I know you're having to upload to a contact list and also uploading to the data table. Obviously, if you're using the APIs, you can just incorporate that into your script or job that you've put together. But that is an option there. And then, of course, when you clear your contact list, you'll also want to clear that data table. So that's one way to do it. Go ahead.
Cool. And then real quick, because he does have a follow-up where he talks about data tables. On a side note to this, we use data tables to manage phone numbers. So if we have had an abusive caller, we enter the number in there and the call is disconnected with a message. I'm almost asking if there was a way for a phone number to be automatically entered into a data table when we reach a voicemail for that customer. And when that customer calls in, the call is transferred to the outbound team and the number is removed from the data table automatically.
Yep, absolutely. So that's something we can actually add on here. So when you are doing a dialer and you're doing your call analysis and the call analysis indicates that it's a voicemail, you would actually transfer that to an outbound flow, I'm sure, where you're playing a message and things like that. And what you can actually do is before you disconnect the call after playing the message, you could put a data action in there, which would then take that contact or take that Annie and add it to a contact list. Or to a data table, I should say, sorry. So you'd add that to a data table, and then you could do a lookup against that data table to see if that particular user calls back. So with that specific use case and that added knowledge, that would be what I'd recommend. And to go a little deeper into these data actions and the data table that I'm talking about. So if I was to come in here, create a data table, we're going to go ahead and call it dialer campaign contacts. And when it comes to the key, I just went ahead and put number. Don't really need anything else because we're just trying to match whether or not a specific contact in an outbound dialer where we reach their voicemail. We can identify those when they call back into those numbers. So in the outbound flow, you would go ahead and add a data action to where if the call analysis indicated that it was not a live person, it was a machine, then you would go ahead and play your message and then invoke a data action, which would then add this phone number to the data table. So that way, if they called back in, you would have inside of your inbound flows a lookup against this data table, and the key would be that Annie. So to go a little deeper into this, we do have data actions like I was talking about. I have one here called add row to data table. I went ahead and created this for you, and we will attach this with the show on the community. And when you come into the contracts, I have data table ID, I have phone number, and then when it comes to response, we're just returning the key for this operation. This is a post, so I've got the configuration set up here. And all of this is ready to go. For the request body, since I'm just going to do that one key, I just indicated the key, and then we're going to input the phone number here. So if I come in here, this is where I can run this test. As we can see, there's nothing in the data table right now. I actually had this pulled up in here. So this is the same thing as running it in that data action. These are the developer tools, the API Explorer. If you do not utilize these, I highly suggest you start to make your life a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and use this data action, though, to add a phone number. So I'm going to do 8675309, and I'm going to run this data action, and we can see that it was ran successfully, and it returned the key that we just put in. So if I go ahead and refresh this data table, go back into it, we can see that that entry is there. So now we're also going to want to create a data action that will delete that table entry, because obviously we don't want to have that table just go forever. So to give a little bit more information on how that's done, I'm actually going to create one from scratch. So if you come into the developer tools here and you open up the particular API that you're wanting to call, so I'm wanting to do delete a row entry. And we can see here that it requires a data table. ID as well as a row ID, and it is a delete action. So if we come back into our integrations here, we're going to go ahead and click action. I click on Genesys Cloud Data Actions that I have set up integration, and I'm just going to call this delete data table row. All right, so we're going to go ahead and click add. And when we come in here to go to the setup, the first thing I do is to go to the configuration page. I'm going to change this from a get to a delete. It's just giving me a warning message saying, are you sure? I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in the API that I copied from here. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to want is to create our contract. So for this one, it's pretty simple. We're going to leave an object, and the other two contracts are going to be strings. So one is going to be the data table ID. Oop, if I could spell today. All right, data table ID. The next one that's undefined is actually going to be the row ID. In this specific case, when we go to do the outbound contracts and map those responses, this API, I know because I've ran it in the past, does not actually return anything on the response. So we just simply need to know if it was successful or not. So we're going to go ahead and leave these in here. If I go to the configuration page, again, we can see here where it says data table ID. We're going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to input the available input for data table ID. So if I click on that, it'll automatically paste that in there. I'm going to do the same thing for the row ID. All right, we've got that in there. Again, we don't need to put anything in the body template for this. The response, we're just going to leave it as a raw result. We don't have to do any translation mappings or use any velocity macros, anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and save this draft, and I'm going to go back in and we're going to test it. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in my ID. And then in here, the row ID is actually going to be the key. So for this specific scenario, it is 8675309. And if I run this action, we should get back a success message, which we did. If we looked at the JSON, we can see that it's just an empty object. And if we go back into the data table and refresh, it should be gone. So there you go. So whenever you go to import that into the flow, you'll just want to go ahead and have an add on the voicemail section of your outbound dialer flow for the call analysis for voicemail. And then you'll want to add in this data action on your inbound flow, where if you found a match, you'll go ahead and delete it and then transfer to queue. That's how I would recommend doing that. Yeah. And we will attach the JSON files for these data actions. If you want to go ahead and create your own, I encourage you to do that. Otherwise, you can always come in here, click import, browse to the JSON format file that I gave you, and you will be able to import these data actions that we just showed. Whenever you're running data actions like this, it's important that you follow or look to the Genesys Cloud limits. Whenever you're doing this, depending on your use case, call volume, builds, flows, everything else, you want to make sure that you're accounting for any specific limits that you might hit when it comes to these platform APIs. These are safeguards put in place for Genesys services. So you can go through here and see specific API limits for analytics, analytic alerts. So the one that comes into mind for this particular one would be under data actions right here. And you have 900 data actions per minute is your current maximum. So you'll want to look at that. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything like that, let us know.
I think the only other follow-up that you haven't exactly touched on is this second slug. Let's assume that the outbound team doesn't want their own phone number and doesn't want a menu IVR option that directs calls to them. Does that change anything that you shared previously?
So if we're adding them to a data table only for voicemail, then no, they'd be able to have that kind of look up and pull that information. Just to kind of go over it, as an option, though. When you're doing your contact list and you're actually building that contact list, instead of having to create an entry and adding it to a data table and things like that, depending on your call volume and number of data actions and stuff, because obviously there's limits there. When you go to create a contact list, when you first upload it, you're able to specify a unique identifier, which is called the contact ID for that particular contact. So if you were to actually utilize the phone number as the unique identifier, then what you could do is you could create a data action here, and you could specify the contact list ID, and the contact ID would actually be the phone number. So you could actually just make that API request, and then as you can see here, I return back the above average Joes, and that is the phone number that I called from. And you could return that into a data action and use that information to indicate whether or not they were callable and the previous actions from the outbound dialer.
Cool. Excellent.
Yep.
Patrick, thanks so much for all the information. I can see why they call you an above average Joe. Better than the rest.
There we go.
Great having you on the show again. It's been a little while since you were last here, but I'm sure we'll be catching up with you again later this summer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody, that's it. Again, thank you to everybody who joined. The Hybrid Media Orgs is a really big release. We know a lot of people are excited about it. If you liked hearing from Alan and Greg and may have some follow-up questions, let us know in the community. They'd be happy to join us, maybe for an AMA or to do another recording to get those questions answered. As always, remember, check out the WEM community. They always have so much cool content coming out, and they're doing WEN-A right now, which is your chance to win some contests and prizes. And I'll see you in the community. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. We hope it was helpful and maybe a little bit entertaining. Each week, our hosts and experts review community discussions and debate what content to discuss, so your voice matters. Did we miss something? Do you have a question for the show? Let us know. Join the conversation at the Genesys online community. As a Genesys customer or partner, you can create an account. Just click the sign-in button found on most pages and follow the necessary instructions to create an account. Also, feel free to email us at qashow@genesys.com. We'd love to hear from you. If this is your first episode, welcome. You can view our entire archives. Go to the Helpful Links panel found on most community pages and find the QA Show archive that interests you. We appreciate your support of the show and the community. Cheers!